The golden afternoon light draped across my quiet neighborhood like a warm quilt, the gentle hum of suburban life uninterrupted by the usual chaos. A stillness settled over everything, broken only by the occasional chatter of birds flitting between well-manicured lawns. I cherished these moments, where time seemed to slow down, the world wrapped in tranquility. It was a stark contrast to what lay ahead, though I didn't know it yet. It started innocuously enough. Karen, our newly self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association, had taken an interest in my garden. A clipped note delivered to my mailbox mentioned the unsightly overgrowth, which, in truth, were wildflowers that danced with the breeze. They were my nod to nature in a world of uniformity. Her note suggested they were a violation of some unwritten aesthetic code she'd conjured. I smiled at the irony. Nature, in its raw, chaotic beauty, was unwelcome here. Ignoring the note felt like the right choice. A silent protest in a neighborhood where compliance was a currency, I watched the wildflowers sway defiantly, their colors vibrant against the monotony of manicured green. They were a testament to resilience, thriving amidst conformity, much like myself, or so I like to think. Karen's next maneuver came as a surprise. Returning from the store, I found my garage door slightly ajar. Inside, boxes that weren't mine sat in neat stacks, old lamps, faded Christmas decorations, and a curious assortment of forgotten household items filled the space where my car should have been. They were relics of someone else's life, unceremoniously dumped into mine. I could imagine the conversation Karen might have had with herself. Perhaps she'd thought it efficient, a temporary solution to her own clutter, or maybe it was deliberate, a territorial display cloaked in passive aggression. Either way, the audacity of it was as bracing as a splash of cold water. I closed the garage door with a quiet thud, the sound resonating like a punctuation mark in the still air. Inside, I brewed a cup of coffee, the rich aroma curling like a tendril of defiance. I sipped it slowly, letting the warmth seep into my bones. There was no anger, no sense of urgency, just a curious calm. I saw her actions as they were a game, and if she wanted to play, I would oblige, but on my terms. The next few days unfolded in quiet observation, a game of chess without words. Karen's presence was a constant, her eyes assessing from behind lace curtains. A queen, surveying her kingdom. I moved through the motions of my life with deliberate ease, my actions slow and measured. There was power in patience. I reminded myself, a quiet strength in waiting for the right moment. As I pondered Karen's motives, the boxes in my garage became less an intrusion and more an opportunity. An idea began to take shape, subtle yet potent. Just as Karen had displaced nature from my garden, she had now embedded a piece of her chaos into my life. It was time to restore balance, but not through confrontation. Instead, I would wield irony with the precision of a sculptor, carving out a resolution that was both just and unexpected. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across my front lawn. The wildflowers danced in the evening breeze. Unaware of the machinations of humans, I looked out at their vibrant defiance, and a smile played at the corners of my lips. Soon, things would find their place, but for now, I simply watched and waited. The sun rose reluctantly, casting a tentative glow over the uniform rows of houses in our HOA-controlled neighborhood, each more indistinguishable than the last. The mailboxes stood like sentinels, bearing silent witness to another day of suburban warfare. Karen's latest salvo was a masterpiece of petty bureaucracy. An envelope stuffed with official-looking papers arrived at my door, bearing the mark of the HOA like a crest of nobility. Inside, a list of violations, absurd in their specificity, each infraction more ludicrous than the last. Grass too tall, according to a rule invented only yesterday. A garden gnome, cheerful and oblivious, suddenly declared an eyesore. The color of my front door, a shade Karen had praised just last week, now a blight on the community's aesthetic harmony. These were her tactics, an arsenal of rules, wielded like weapons, designed to wear me down, to break my resolve. But beneath the surface of her official grievances, there simmered an undercurrent of malice. Karen was playing a long game, a chess match against an opponent she assumed would fold under pressure. But I had no intention of conceding. As I walked the block that morning, I could feel the whispers ripple through the air. Like the rustle of dry leaves, Karen's influence spread like ink in water, staining clear reputations with hints of scandal. Neighbors I once greeted with easy smiles now glanced away, their eyes filled with the shadow of doubt she had cast. I didn't need to hear their words to know the stories she spun, little narratives of negligence, of reckless disregard for the unspoken rules of our community. Her fiction was well crafted, and in some small way, I almost admired her skill for it. Almost. But I was not without my own resources. Knowledge was power, and Karen had laid bare her strategy, unintentional in her overconfidence. Her every citation only served to illuminate the path she hoped I would take submission. Yet, I chose a different course, quietly, methodically. I began to dismantle her defense, not with brute force, but with the subtlety of a craftsman. Her junk, now scattered across the neighborhood, had found its way into curious hands, each piece a testament to her hypocrisy. In the same breath, she condemned my supposed transgressions. She tried to erase the evidence of her own, but there was an irony in her overreach. For every neighbor who now questioned my character, there was another who knew the truth, who had accepted a piece of Karen's history into their home. Still, the game was far from over. The tension was a live wire, sparking with potential energy, waiting for the right moment to ignite. I could feel it humming beneath the surface, an electric pulse driving us both toward the inevitable confrontation. And so, I moved through the day with a steady resolve, a quiet power that Karen underestimated. She saw only what she wanted to see, a lone figure against the backdrop of her orchestrated chaos. But I understood the art of patience, the strength of silence. In the end, it was not the noise that would determine the outcome, but the stillness, the calm before the storm. The days following Karen's invasion of my garage were a blur of chaotic thoughts and simmering resentment. My once orderly space, the sanctum of half-finished projects and silent contemplation, was now an eyesore, cluttered with her forgotten relics and the echoes of her entitlement. But I was not one to yield to chaos without a fight. I documented everything, every skewed angle of her lawn chairs, the broken lamp she insisted was antique, the moldy boxes that seemed to have absorbed her intrusive nature. I snapped pictures from every angle, capturing the haphazardness of her deposit proof of her trespass. In the quiet of my now cluttered sanctuary, I planned my counter, not with the loud, abrasive tactics she might employ, but with the subtlety of a well-timed breeze that alters the course of a leaf in flight. I would let her own actions turn back upon her. It was a dance, and I had always been light on my feet. The Homeowners Association meeting was my stage, a gathering notorious for its undercurrents of tension and unspoken rivalries, each member dressed in their suburban armor, ready to defend their plots of land and social standing. Karen, of course, held court at the center, a self-appointed monarch in this small kingdom of grass and gutters. I waited for the perfect moment. The agenda flowed predictably: budgetary concerns, landscaping disputes, the usual minor grievances elevated to matters of state. And then a pause, a lull in the conversation, ripe for the taking. I raised my hand, a gesture more of courtesy than necessity. Calmly, I presented my evidence, the pictures, the cataloged inventory of my garage's forced transformation. I spoke not of anger, but of facts, each word a gentle push, guiding the collective gaze towards Karen. She stared at the images, her features a mask of practiced innocence, but I saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes. It was the look of one caught mid-act, the unraveling of a carefully constructed persona. Around the room, Whispers rose like a soft tide, carrying with them nods of agreement and raised eyebrows. Karen's facade held barely as she delivered a line of feigned concern, her voice a thin veneer of politeness. I didn't realize it was such an inconvenience. It was almost poetic. The irony of her words, I let them hang in the air, a testament to her disconnection from reality. The meeting moved on, the tide receding, leaving her isolated on her self-made island. In the days that followed, the pieces of her intrusion began to disappear from my life, one by one. Neighbors approached with offers to help redistribute her belongings to more willing recipients. A folding chair found a home on a porch down the street. The lamp was taken by an artist who saw potential in its fractured lines. Soon, my garage was my own again, a space of quiet reclamation. The final vestiges of her presence were gone, absorbed into the community she had tried to dominate. I stood in the middle of my reclaimed sanctuary, feeling the calm return. Sometimes, justice isn't a loud storm, but a gentle breeze that clears the clouds. The once quiet echo of our neighborhood had become a cacophony of whispers and pointed glances. Karen's belongings, once a secret weight pressing against my garage door, were now in the hands of those who sought treasure in another's trash. I had been discreet, or so I thought. But discretion is a flimsy curtain in a place like this, where curiosity grows like weeds in the cracks of genteel facades. It began with the rumbling of distant engines, the slow parade of cars rolling past my driveway, their drivers' eyes scanning for remnants of Karen's empire. Word had spread faster than I'd anticipated, each item finding a new home more quickly than the last. The lawnmower, once a rusted sentinel of neglect, now purred contentedly for the Johnsons, who lived 3 doors down. The ornate but slightly chipped mirror had found a spot in the Wilkins hallway, reflecting their penchant for shabby chic with just the right touch of irony. My actions, though silent, spoke volumes. The neighborhood was changing, its equilibrium disturbed, like a pond rippling after a stone's throw. Karen, oblivious still to the currents she had stirred, continued her reign from the comfort of her manicured fortress, issuing decrees on paint colors and lawn lengths, unaware of the hollowing out of her material kingdom. Each day, as the sun slanted in the sky, I watched from my window, a quiet observer of this unfolding drama. Neighbors who had once nodded politely now lingered, their eyes asking questions their tongues dared not voice. A tension simmered beneath the surface, a growing discontentment with the unspoken rules that had governed our lives. In the heart of this unrest, my own heart beat steadily, unfazed by the consequences looming on the horizon. I had not set out to become a catalyst, merely a participant in a personal struggle, but sometimes a simple act of rebellion can light a fire. And I watched as the flames danced, licking at the edges of Karen's carefully constructed world. Her possessions, scattered now like leaves in the wind, were no longer her burden. They had become mine, a collection of stories and secrets shared between neighbors, binding us together in this quiet rebellion. The irony was not lost on me, that in freeing myself from her encroachment, I had inadvertently sown the seeds of change. And then, a knock at my door, a sound sharp and insistent, echoing through the hallway like a gavel striking wood. In that moment, the world held its breath. I opened it to find Karen herself, her eyes a storm of questions, her mouth a thin line of resolve. The silent movie of our lives had reached a crucial scene, and words, rarely chosen, found their place. "Wow, where's my stuff?" she asked, her voice a blade seeking its mark. I looked at her, the calm at the center of the storm. No need for pretenses now. The truth lay bare between us, a live wire sparking with potential. "All around," I replied, letting the weight of my words settle. In that moment, the neighborhood held its breath again, the air thick with possibility. Tensions had mounted. True. But from tension comes understanding. From conflict, clarity. The ripple was now a wave, carrying us to unknown shores. And in the quiet that followed, I could almost hear the neighborhood exhale, waiting for what would come next. The street lay quiet under the early morning sun, casting long shadows that draped over the neighborhood like a patchwork quilt. It was the kind of stillness that invites reflection, a momentary ceasefire in the war of petty grievances and neighborly disputes. I sat at the kitchen table, the surface cold against my palms, contemplating my next steps with the steady calm of a chess player plotting an inevitable checkmate. Karen had overplayed her hand. Her junk, once an imposition in my garage, had become a symbol of her disregard for boundaries, both physical and personal. It was time for a less public, more strategic approach. I had spent the previous weeks researching, gathering my tools for a different kind of battle. Sometimes, paper cuts can be more painful than any sword. The folder in front of me was thick with documents, legal precedents, HOA bylaws, and correspondence records. Each sheet was a stepping stone toward reclaiming my space and peace of mind. I leafed through them, feeling the weight of each page as a quiet promise of freedom. I had found a clause, a small but potent weapon buried in the dense legalese of our HOA agreement. The bylaws were clear. Unauthorized storage of personal items in another's property was a violation. The irony was delicious. Karen, the self-appointed guardian of HOA compliance, had unwittingly violated the very rules she wielded like a cudgel. Her blind spot was my opportunity. I quietly prepared the necessary documentation to submit a formal complaint. It was a process akin to watching a slow tide erode a stubborn sandcastle. I just needed to let nature take its course. As I sealed the envelope, I thought about the ripple effect this would have, how it would echo through our sleepy street, stirring up the stagnant waters of our little community. It would be a test of patience, a waiting game. The wheels of bureaucracy turn slowly, but they are inexorable once set in motion. Days turned into weeks. I continued to live my life with deliberate normalcy, each interaction with Karen a study in restraint. She remained blissfully unaware, her condescending smiles and patronizing waves unaltered by the impending storm. I wondered if she would ever see it coming. Probably not. People like her rarely do. Then, one morning, the letter arrived. Official HOA stationery, crisp and authoritative. I opened it with a slow, deliberate motion, savoring the moment. The board had reviewed the complaint and determined there was indeed a violation. Karen was to remove her belongings or face escalating fines. The scales of neighborhood justice had tipped, if ever so slightly, in my favor. I didn't rush to tell her. I let the letter find its way to her mailbox, its presence as inevitable as the dawn. It was a strange relief, knowing I had done what I could. The rest was up to her. I imagined her face upon reading it, the dawning realization that her reign of trivial terror was not as absolute as she believed. And then, the aftermath, the slow dismantling of her encroachment, piece by piece, until my garage stood empty, a blank canvas waiting for new beginnings. The air seemed cleaner, the light brighter. It was more than just space reclaimed. It was peace, hard-won and deeply satisfying. Karen, no doubt, would find new ways to needle and provoke. But now, I was armed with the knowledge that I could outmaneuver her with quiet, methodical precision. The world she tried to control was not as small or compliant as she imagined. As I rinsed my coffee cup under the tap, the water swirled down the drain in smooth, even circles. Everything was in its right place once again. The sun was just beginning to stretch its golden limbs across the suburban rooftops when I stepped outside, feeling the crisp morning air bite at my cheeks. The neighborhood was waking up, and with it, the quiet murmur of a community coming back to life after a storm of discord. Karen's reign had been long, a tempest of rules and regulations. her authority tightening like a vice around the throats of those who dared to breathe freely. But now, there was a shift, an unthreading of the tightly wound fabric she had woven. I could feel it in the air. Change, sweet and slow, like syrup trickling from a maple tree. Her junk was gone. The garage was finally empty, echoing with a hollow freedom, each corner breathing a sigh of relief. The treasures she had hoarded, hidden behind the guise of misplaced benevolence, had found new homes. A lawn chair here, a set of mismatched china there. Each piece was a testament to the unspoken revolt, a quiet rebellion that had united us in ways she never anticipated. I walked down the street, the brisk morning air filling my lungs with clarity. The neighborhood was quieter now, the chaos of Karen's clutter no longer casting its long shadow over our lives. It was as if an unseen weight had been lifted, buoying us all on a wave of collective relief. As I passed by the homes, I noticed subtle changes. A garden gnome peeking from behind a bush where once there was none. A bird bath newly placed in a front yard, its water glistening under the emerging sun. Each small addition was a silent victory, a ripple effect of the night we took back what was ours. Karen's house loomed at the end of the cul-de-sac, its facade immaculate, but somehow dimmed, like a once proud queen stripped of her crown. I could almost hear the echo of her discontent, a distant rumbling of a dethroned monarch grappling with her new reality. The community had spoken, not with loud words or vicious declarations, but with the quiet resolve of those who had found their voice. The irony was not lost on me. For all her rules and demands, it was Karen who now found herself outside the very circle she had tried to control. Life, in its own poetic justice, had made her a guest in her kingdom. As I turned to leave, a movement caught my eye. Karen stood at her window, her silhouette framed by the morning light, a figure both proud and pitiable. I imagined her watching us, the community she tried so hard to mold, moving on without her anchor. Her eyes, once sharp and demanding, now seemed softer, perhaps even wistful. There was a part of me small and deeply buried that almost felt a pang of sympathy, but the larger part, the part that had lived under her reign, felt nothing but quiet satisfaction. We had reclaimed our neighborhood, one piece of discarded junk at a time. As I walked back to my now uncluttered garage, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, the kind of peace that comes not from loud victories, but from the gentle triumph of small, everyday courage. We had done it. We had found a way to restore balance, to bring light back into our lives. Karen may have been sidelined, but in that, we found our center. The community was whole again, woven together by the threads of shared stories, silent nods, and the quiet rebellion of those who refused to be silenced. The sun climbed higher, casting its warm embrace over the neighborhood. A new day had dawned, and with it, the promise of calm, quietly powerful tomorrows.